A blank slate. We're talking about Matrix games today. Do you guys know about Matrix games? Man, I hope so, because I don't. And yet, I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about them. Let me give you a quick warning here. Got my good buddy Bisco. She's going to be hanging with us. Say hi, Biscotti. No, yeah, it's probably smart. She's not much of a talker. She didn't get that from me. Like I said, we're going to talk about Matrix games today. And this is a topic that has been kind of pinging my radar for a while here. Off and on over the last, well, you know what we do here in the House of Wargaming. We are pursuing war games at a very deep level. We try to go deeper into the culture, deeper into the process, and deeper into the substrate and foundation of war games. We have made a lot of really interesting discoveries over the last couple of years together, right? Because for all my arrogance, and justifiably so, I am also humble enough to admit when I'm wrong, when I'm out of my element, and when other people know more than I do. It happens far more than I like to admit, but yet I admit it. And it's probably a mistake to talk a lot about Matrix games, given how little I've looked into it. So I wanted to talk about my first impressions, ask you guys down in the comments, what am I missing here? Am I wildly off base? Is this a subject I should keep pursuing? Because frankly, everything I see about Matrix games, the more I see of it, the more frustrating it gets. The more angry I get about this process, which is really odd because, well, I guess we should probably talk about what Matrix games are. And Matrix games are the longhouse of war games. This is the all-consuming mother style. Oh, we'll give them long hair too. Basically, you set up a proposition, you set up a couple of sides, and then you just talk about it. You just figure it out. I'm not quite sure where the term matrix comes from. Essentially, based on, again, my limited understanding, you set up a conflict that needs to be resolved. And that you have two primary antagonists, and we'll call it protagonist. And each of these antagonists and protagonists has a couple of sub-allies, I guess you could say. Supporters, let's call them supporters. And the supporters don't necessarily agree with themselves. To take an American example, or just any other, let's not get too, localized. Anytime you have a political party, you will have multiple factions within that political party. Or you may have a subject or a topic that a political party which has two wings. They don't like each other, but they both support that process. So, for example, you might have socialists, low-key socialists and straight-up communists, all supporting, they want a leftist in power, or I should put them over here because they're very antagonistic to life, but they don't like each other so much. And then you may have an outside actor that says, you know what, I could go either way. Right? And so what you do is you assign each of these to one person, and then you have a proposition about what's going to happen. And you talk about it. You have rounds, and there's a structure to it where the antagonist will say, I think X is going to happen. And then you go around the table and the protagonist says, well, it's not going to happen because of X, Y, and Z. And the antagonist supporters say, oh, well, it will happen because of A, B, and C. And then you have some kind of a resolution. Maybe it's the weight of the arguments. Maybe it's a referee that decides whether X does or does not happen. Maybe there's some kind of a random dice mechanic that allows it to happen. But once you have determined whether X happens, all of those supporting arguments become true. So it's very possible in these Matrix games to have a short-term victory. Yes, X happened, except all of the true things that I said, all of the things that I said would happen, if it happens, they might come back to bite me in the butt later on. So it's very much a stand around a table and talk. I guess I'm not sure where this comes in. It's very much a political situation. And like any game, I can imagine that there is a game beneath the game where you're going through this process of the talking, that there will be things going on beneath the surface. For example, and this is one of the things that frustrates me about Matrix games. The platonic ideal of a Matrix game. Hey, you know what? If we get each of these factions has, we'll call it, two players that have to agree on a thing. and agree what their position is going to be. So you're going to have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. You got 14 people in a room, right? I always say all of us are smarter than any of us. And if we all go into this with our eyes wide open and really interested in pursuing the good, the beautiful, and the true, and we want to know how this conflict is going to play out, and we may be able to use this process to anticipate where the major fault lines are going to be and what might drive this faction to then switch over to here. We may be able to use this as some kind of a predictive tool in the way you do traditional war games. Much like science, this is a great idea, but then you inject people into it. And just like with science, where you have a great many scientists say, listen, I'm smart enough to know what the results of this experiment are going to be, so I'm going to figure out how to get the data that proves I'm right. I'm going to spend my time arguing why all of the data that proves I'm wrong doesn't really count. Okay? That's how climate scientists work. Whoop. See? Oh, it's so hot. The Earth is getting so much hotter. Same thing here. You know, I'm going to set up this Matrix game that's going to help me decide what the path forward is. And by the way, my organization is funded by an NGO that is very much in pursuit of increasing homogenization of global power into the hands of a few elites. My organization is paying me to run a Matrix game to figure out whether they should be granted more power. And I'm a pretty smart guy. I work for them because I believe in their mission. So I'm going to set up this game, and here's where it gets really dangerous. While it is easy to set up a game where your initial parameters and assumptions and your referee is directing the results to your desired end, it's even easier to create a war game where the results are being steered towards your desired end in a way that you don't even realize you are doing it. To set it up, you just look, it just naturally, I understand how the world works. I understand how politics works. I understand what we can and can't do. So I'm going to make sure that the avenues of approach, my decision trees, are all going to bend ever so gently so that at the end of the game, oh, hey, wow, look at that. All of my preconceived notions are supported by the Matrix game. This is a tool that is only as good as the people who wield it. And from the limited amount of reading that I have done, this is a tool that is used by people who are not in support of the good, the beautiful, and the true. And I cannot get terribly excited about a process that should support the good, the beautiful. We'll add one of those there just in case your mind bends that way. I can't support the tool in and of itself. The tool is only as good as the people that use it. And the people developing these tools all seem to have put an awful lot of weight on one side of the scale. They talk a good game about diversity. We need to make sure that we've got lots of different kind of boxes on this side of the scale, so long as they're all on that side of the scale. Now, here's the other thing with Matrix games. The notion that all 14 of us that all of us are smarter than any of us. Bear in mind, we do need some diversity. We want to get information from all sides so that we don't channel everything to one end. One of the leading proponents of these Matrix games, and again, I reiterate, I haven't delved too deeply into this. I'm asking you guys for help. I'm asking you guys to motivate me to look into it a little more. Here's what I see. We take a very simple proposition. All of us are smarter than any of us. And we want to get a diversity of positions, a diversity of points of view. Because what we are doing is we don't want to have everybody that looks exactly the same. That's going to lead us down a channel. It's going to lead us down a one-way street. We need to get people who are on different sides of whatever aisle we're looking at. Could be religious, could be political. If we're dealing with a religious question, how can these various groups of religious people live well together? We're not going to ask these people, hey, how can you get along with these guys, without asking these guys? You got to get people from all sides of the position. However, who's funding these people? Is it an organization dedicated to the increasing the power of international organizations? What if these people, let me back up. Let me ask the question this way. What is the locally focused organization that has the resources necessary to send locally focused individuals to an internationally focused conference or situation like this? It ain't cheap getting plane tickets to a major metropolitan area and a weekend hotel in the downtown area and all the there's already, I can already see that most of these games are going to be, just because of the logistics, slanted towards one end of the scale. Not only that, but you need to have, I'm told, that you want to have a diversity of points of view. But here's the big problem. Before you can set foot into this arena, you have to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes. When you step into this Matrix game, you are given a role as an antagonist or protagonist. There are a lot of people in this world I'm going to put the number 100 here. We'll just put that at the top of the bell curve. Half the people are on this side, half the people are on that side. Right about here, when it comes to intelligence, and I'm just making up some numbers, you've got a number of about 90. All of these people have no capacity to understand prepositional clauses. You ask them, and the classic here, I'll put up a graphic. This is a green text. I see no reason not to believe it. You ask a person a hypothetical question, and they freeze up. They cannot handle that level of abstract thinking. Did you have if you did not have breakfast this morning, would you be hungry? I don't know what you're talking about, dude. I had breakfast. I know, but if you didn't, would you be hungry right now? Well, I'm not hungry now. I know you're not hungry right now. That's because you're not hungry because you ate. But if you didn't eat, would you be hungry? I'm not hungry, right? That's not a particularly high hurdle. But a lot of the people over here in this part of this chart, they can only see to about here, and then they shut down. Their awareness only extends so far. And this brings us back to this notion of, look, I don't even know what I don't know. I can't see it. So going back to our diversity, you are already, by the very basis of these Matrix games, shutting out at least a third of the population. You're not going to be able to tap into and understand how these people react. And you might say these people watch one particular Foxy News. I don't know how to draw a fox. This is probably a mistake. You might think they watch a central news network. But if you think these people are dumb, you have to deal with the fact, if you think the dumb people are over here, you have to deal with the fact that these people are incapable of role-playing, of understanding and implementing, okay, I want you to assume that you are of this persuasion. But dude, I'm one of these guys. I know that, but can you pretend that you are? What if you were? How would you feel about this situation? How would you feel about this, I don't know, major Supreme Court case that may or may not be coming down the road based on a leaked draft report? How would you feel if you were these people? But I'm not those people. That's a huge chunk of diversity that you've cut right out of your game. All right. So that's one of the other things that I'm concerned about. This looks interesting, but man, I don't. And I've thrown up some graphics here showing some. And there's some of the more videos in here, but man, I just. You know, and the other thing is, probably part of the problem is that I'm a mathematically inclined guy. So, you know, when I hear matrix, I immediately start thinking ones and zeros. I immediately start thinking about, you know, advanced linear algebra and that kind of thing. Or a matrix that looks like this, right? Here's a matrix. And then to find out that a matrix is just kind of the... And I should also point out, one of the reasons that I'm thinking about this is because I think we're sneaking up on this, right? As we talk about certain games, as we talk about certain styles of play, as we talk about shunting off, here's my campaign map, oh, here's a little battle, let's shunt it off to a smaller map, and I'm going to have Joe game out this one little bit, and then I'm going to plug it back in, and oh, here's a battle, and I'm going to farm that battle out to Bill, and then I'm going to plug it back into my campaign map. We are kind of, or when we do, hey, I just kind of figured it out. You know, I set up a complicated situation. I started moving the pieces around, and the more I think about it, the more I realize, oh, I might be doing like a solo Matrix game. I think we're reaching some kind of a horseshoe theory of wargaming, and that's part of why I've been looking at Matrix games. Matrix games owe a lot to our good friend, the Kriegspiel. Hey, remember those? Except they've been rebranded to do away with a lot of the Krieg part of it, so we can get back to the Longhouse part of it. And we all know, there's nothing casual about my soggy knees. And that may be part of it, too. I have my foibles, weaknesses, same as everybody else. Hey, maybe you think I belong over here on this side of the bell curve. It's entirely possible, at least when it comes to this subject. But I'm slowly sneaking up in this direction. And expect to see a little bit more about Matrix games, but this is just kind of a one man's initial response to Matrix games. If I'm wrong, let me know. I'm praying for you. Thanks for coming along, Biscotti.